When you're wrestling with the voice of God and wondering if what you're hearing is from God, and as you go through this 40-day challenge, as you wrestle with that, let me say to you that the best and clearest and most confident place to begin to learn the timbre, the tenor, the character, the intonation of God is in His Scriptures. Go there and compare what you've heard from other people, what you've received in impressions, and what you're praying about, and see if it's there. Now, Scripture will not tell you on a specific day whether to turn right or to turn left, but it will tell you what God sounds like. It will reveal to you what the most important things He's already spoken are, and it will help you to be able to compare that in the future. Does that make sense? So immerse yourself in that Scripture so that when the voice of God speaks, you recognize it. You say, that sounds familiar. That sounds familiar. Then the king with the queen, Scripture. Then the king with the queen sitting beside him asked me, how long will your journey take and when will you get back? So here's what happens. Nehemiah is praying and praying about it, and one day he walks into the king's presence and he's sad. He's gloomy. He's a cupbearer for the king, which probably means he also was to taste the wine to make sure it wasn't poisoned. So he's in the presence of the king and he's sad, which, let me tell you something, is a dangerous thing to do. Because the king has the ability to say, I don't like sad people around me. It makes me feel sad. It makes me feel like I'm not a good king. So anybody who's sad in my presence will be executed. That was not uncommon. It's not uncommon among kings. So Nehemiah happens to be sad in the presence of the king. And the king says to him, why are you so sad? And Nehemiah stops and thinks, uh-oh, what am I going to do now? And Nehemiah just tells him, I long to go back, honestly, to my people and to see the walls restored. And the king says to him, how long will your journey take and when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates so they will provide my safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so that he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple and for the city wall and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my request. So I went to the governor of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. And the king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. See how everything falls into place here for Nehemiah? Certainly circumstances can go well, and it doesn't necessarily mean that God is speaking or leading in that direction. And certainly things can go poorly, like they did for Paul when he was thrown in prison and beaten. And it doesn't mean God is not directing you in that direction. But sometimes when God has led you and the Scripture's confirmed and the prayers have been prayed and you're walking with God and you start to go that direction, things line up very well. We had a lot of those experiences, those of you who've been here from the beginning with Lifesong, didn't we? We've had a lot of those moments where things just fell into place. The king gave us the letters for the governors, didn't he? So circumstances are not irrelevant. Sometimes they do have a way of helping you understand you're hearing from the voice of God. I just want to point out probably the most important bottom line, then we'll go back to some worship here, but this relates to the next song we're going to sing. Nehemiah says in his prayer, he says, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying. He says, I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's house, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and the laws you gave your servant Moses. As he's praying and asking God what to do, his first priority is to say, God, I'm sorry, and I just want to be obedient to you. And I think if you want to hear the voice of God, it really has to start there. Romans says that, in fact. It says, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices. At the end of that section, it says, then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Let's have the music team go ahead and come back up. Think about this for a moment, though. If you want to know what God's will is, you have a couple of options, and one works better than the other. One option to know God's will is to make sure you spend all your time focused on trying to discern what God's will is. You can pray, you can look at your circumstances, you can listen to people around you, you can read your Scripture, and you can try to discern, what is God saying to me? And the fact is, when God speaks to you, you still may not know it because you may not have committed yourself to hear anything that he has to say. You can say to God, tell me what your will is, and then I'll decide if I want to obey. And God doesn't generally work that way. Or you can say, God, whatever it is, wherever you want to lead me, whatever your will is, I am committed to you. Moms, this morning, I want you to think about it as we sing this next song. And I'm going to ask the moms because it's Mother's Day. And we often think of this, I think, in terms of the fathers. Joshua stands before the people of Israel, and he calls them to just this question. Are you committed to God? Are you going to be in God's service, regardless of where that leads us? Or are you going to wait for him to tell you what he wants from you? Moms, I want you to think this morning, those of you particularly who are still raising your kids, as you raise your families, can you sort of make this commitment in your heart as we sing this morning? As for me and my house, whatever else the world may do, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I want you to remember, Compassion Table's still here. It'll be here for 2 more weeks. Don't forget that there is a real simple way to be a hero to a girl just like that who needs a sponsor, somebody who can afford to help her out. I was also thinking we're also doing the Child Song are doing a bake sale. They're trying to raise funds for the global food crisis. It's one of the things about the time we live, and that there is actually, you hear the word crisis so often, but there is actually a global food crisis right now, meaning that there is less food to be consumed all over the world right now. And in America, that's not anything we even feel. But in places like Africa and various places across the world, it's terrible. And it's real. And so I wanted you to remember that your kids can be superheroes too. Right? This is my super twins. And this is their angry face because they're angry at the poverty and the lack of food in the world. All right? But what happens when you help out with the global food crisis? Aww. There's the happy superheroes because they saved the world. Those of you who have kids in Child Song, this is a chance for your kids to be part of this, and they can also do this too. And by helping out with the bake sale, which will be on the 16th, as it says there, May 16th, for raising funds for that.
The Walgreens on Unser and Southern, and if you want to come by sometime between 10 and 2 and support.
That'd be great. So the Walgreens on Southern and Unser, and between 10 and 2, there will be some people there, and you're welcome to come by and help. That would be great. The other thing is there's another way that we think you can help. But
I have a pet peeve.
Let this guy share something.
And I'm